Hello guys, it's Striker. Welcome back to another reaction video. So today we're going to be doing a reaction video for COD, Call of Duty, Black Ops, Cold War, PS5 versus Xbox Series X, ray tracing, 120 hertz, 120 hertz mode, test plus Series S analysis, man. So shout out to Digital Foundry, man. Pretty much they do a lot of comparison between system and check the graphics, and yeah, man, very good analysis when it comes to like gaming and performance and all that good stuff, man. So let me know which one you think is better, man. Which one looks better, which one outperform. Ooh, man, PS5 version of Call of Duty or the Xbox Series X version, man. Which one do you prefer? Which one looks better? And who's the winner? Let me know, man. So shout out to everybody. Hope you guys having a great day. Let me know what system you own, the Xbox Series X or the PS5, and if you haven't owned one yet, man, which one would you want, man? Well, with that, here we go.
Of all the next-gen launch titles, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War ranks among the best ways to see unique PS5 and Xbox Series X features, baby, with a clear benefit in how it plays. It's an often spectacular game regardless of which console you own, and developers Treyarch and Raven Software take us back to the 80s with the over-the-top set-piece design we've come to love from the series. Cold War doesn't disappoint, and the new consoles crank the action up by an extra notch by offering two new ways to play, a 120Hz mode, and support for ray trace shadows. These are bullet points of the new console generation, of course, and I've got to say, have a huge impact. But both modes are taxing and affect PS5 and Series X to different degrees depending on which you choose. So to discuss how these two premium consoles compare and contrast, I've got my good friend and colleague, John Linneman. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good.
The Xbox one looks good.
Yeah, it's been a busy launch week for the next gen. I think we've all got our hands completely filled with games to cover, man. And this one's been
I'm going to be doing a lot of
in the running for a little while now.
Man. All depends on how these videos.
Yeah, I mean, while I was working on Dirt, you've been cranking in the background on this, but on the side, I've also been playing this in my free time on both Series X and PS5. I think it looks really, really good, so there's a lot to talk about. So where do you want to start?
Well, first we should say that we're not going to ignore the Series S, of course. We're going to cover that as well in this video. But yeah, we should start by saying that both the premium consoles, we'll call them Series X and PS5, are kind of feature matched, and Series S does not have the ray tracing and 120Hz toggle. That is only on the more advanced consoles. So I guess we'll start from the top. And Series X with the ray tracing mode enabled.
Which, by the way, let's specify this. There has been some confusion about this. I think when a lot of people see the words ray tracing, they think, oh, reflections. But there's so much more to ray tracing than that. And in this case, the developers
Xbox
ray traced shadows,
X kind of looking
which was
also
something available in last year's
Let me know what you guys
Call
think.
of Duty game. And I think we actually have a video on this coming up as well, which should be interesting. With Alex, of course, the ray tracing meister. Point is, though, is it basically allows for these very precise, very realistic, and very natural shadows. You know, you get perfect soft shadows. You get the sharper shadows up close, contact hardening, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, ray tracing.
It looks really good.
Beautiful.
That is a solid mode indeed, all around. But I think the big draw for me, weirdly enough, is the 120Hz mode.
Right.
Now, I was actually surprised to see this included, and I think we should first note there's a little bit of trickery to getting this to run on the PS5 from what I've seen. So obviously on Xbox, they do the logical thing, and you can adjust your settings from the system menu, right? You can choose 120Hz there, and, you know, just enable it in the game, I suppose. Super simple. On PS5, you actually have to go into the system settings and find the part where you choose your preference between performance or quality modes. This has nothing to do with the game specifically.
That's crazy. You got to go through all that.
But for some reason, similar to widescreen in Criterion games on PlayStation 2, where you actually had to set widescreen in the system OS, which is the only game that I know of that did that, you have to choose the performance mode here. When you do that and you go back into Call of Duty and your TV supports 120Hz mode, you will get that mode. And if you go in the options, and this is what's especially confusing, it will still be grayed out, but it'll say enabled.
Which is weird, isn't it?
It's weird, but that's what it's doing, so that hopefully that helps some people with the confusion on how to enable that.
Yeah, if you're wondering why it's grayed out, go back a level to the system menus, and you'll be sorted. Yeah, I much
Who owns
prefer the
Digital
Xbox
Foundry?
approach,
Eurogamer, right?
when it comes to this stuff. You know, if we're doing it through the system menus, having it just labeled as 120 hertz makes a lot more sense, but I think in future I'd much rather it in-game, you know, just so it's very clear.
Yeah,
the functionality's
me
there.
too.
I think they're both even on that in that regard. You played campaign, right, with 120 hertz?
I did.
Right now,
Again,
I feel
was
like they're
surprised
trying to
see this
be
in full campaign
too
because,
neutral.
Honestly, this is a beautiful game. I mean, for a launch Call of Duty, you know, we looked at Ghosts last year.
Damn, that's nice.
Way to start the generation. But this looks really good. Good materials, good effects, good post-processing. It's a really beautiful game.
It is.
On all platforms. And the 120 hertz mode is actually super impressive and really solid. We'll get more to this in the performance, but whether you're playing it on Series X or PS5, you're going to have a really good time with this.
That's what's up.
If you have the display that can support it, of course.
That's what's up.
Yeah, absolutely. There's obviously the resolution side of things, which we should touch on. No matter which way you play, the game looks awesome. It looks really well presented, and there's a reconstruction going on regardless of mode. But yes, on the PS5 and Series X, in the ray tracing mode, you've got a target of 4K 3840 by 2160, but that can go down to 1800p. Though we have noticed like the horizontal axis kind of chops in half sometimes when things are really taxing, and that means you get kind of maybe a 1920 by 1800 as the lowest.
Yeah, it's interesting the way they do that sort of horizontal scaling.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty effective overall. The image quality in general is solid in this game.
Yeah, but this is like something we've seen in previous Treyarch games, I think, more typically.
That's true.
I can't say I've ever really noticed an issue. I think there's temporal anti-aliasing to help it along and blend those frames, but yeah, it's not an issue.
Headsets on.
On the Series S, there is a 1440p max bounds, 2560 by 1440.
Okay, so that actually that's hitting what Microsoft was talking about. That's good.
It's dynamic res as well, going down to 1200p on Series S, with a similar sort of cut to the horizontal axis independently. But yeah, that's a very typical Treyarch engine approach to dynamic.
Let me know what you think about this. Oh, that's
Okay,
it's a
so we
big
have the
difference, man. You can
resolution
see
for
the
ray
difference
tracing
between
mode, which is key, and then we also know how Series
S
S
and
is
X,
faring,
man.
which is pretty good.
S look
What
ugly.
about 120 hertz? Because I haven't actually pixel counted this myself, but looking at the screen, it does take a noticeable image quality hit, but not so much that I don't think it's still worth using. In fact, it looks a lot better than I would have expected for a 120 hertz game like this. So what did you get?
In the end, it comes to about 1200p typically. I've not recorded many results above that. It's very possible, but so far it's like 1200p. And I've seen it drop to about 1080p, like in the meeting room. You know, you can work around the temporal anti-aliasing to get a good lock on the resolution, and it's just a perfect stair-step match.
Yo,
for
these guys are
a
so
1080p
good, man.
grid.
It's like
That's
me, I
also
would play
true.
the
That's worth
game,
pointing
and
out.
I probably
It's
don't
like,
notice
it
none of the
is
stuff they talking
really
about.
hard to pixel count these 120 hertz modes. At least in my setup, I can't capture 1440p or anything like that, so it has to be 1080p 120.
Yeah, same here. So it's it basically comes down to assessing a super sampled image, if you like. So if it's running above 1080p,
Yeah, which we've done before, and that is a little bit tricky, but it does give you an idea. Okay, so let's talk about the actual differences between the consoles then. From what I've seen going between
That's what I wanna see.
them both, they seem to be pretty much identical.
yeah, like Series X and PS5 really don't have much at all between them. There's a few like anomalies, I guess. Like you'll see ground textures positioned a little differently, you'll see grass distributed a little differently, but it's that usual thing of, okay, it might be randomized, there's not a clear lock on a
So far, so
difference
good, man.
or advantage.
It's not a big
it
difference,
all leans
but
on the resolution, which makes sense to me. I think it makes development a lot easier for them to
I think the Xbox Series X one looks a little bit better.
Work.
That's
You
how I
leave it
feel
up
right
to
now.
the dynamic res to make sure the GPU doesn't
Let me know what you
buckle
guys
too
think.
much. On those two, there's not much between them. It's with Series S that things are definitely the gap
night and
is
day,
quite
night
significantly.
and day.
That kind of makes sense then. So we have pretty high resolutions on the Series S, but so what kind of details? I haven't actually played it on here yet.
Well, the ray tracing is huge. We've gone into this, but it's such a difference, and not having that kind of makes levels look a bit bare in some ways, like just having these pre-baked shadows across terrain. It doesn't quite match up to it, but it's a very typical Call of Duty look for consoles. It's just something we saw like last gen quite often. So it does feel like the promise of Series S as the 1440p variant of the 4K experience on Series X isn't quite true here. It feels like it's just missing that feature, and
so what's the point of Xbox Series S, man? It has no, like, it doesn't really,
and there are a few other,
you just go
like,
play next gen games, that's about it. But
like
with
the
old
grass
gen
density is dropped in some scenes, like the Vietnam level. You walk down this kind of route towards the helicopter, and it's there's some parts where there's a more visible cutback in detail, and also per object motion blur looks to be using a different setting, at least on Series S. But overall, it holds together really well.
You're in the clear.
Copy that, Clark.
The game looks awesome on Series X and PS5, I'd say.
Yes.
But I guess the big question here then is performance. And I spent most of my time in the 120 mode, and I played through several missions on both systems and found them to be very smooth overall, with the exception of one scene with the helicopter, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
For most people, I guess 60 Hz is the way that they'll be playing for now, or the majority of people. There's been
that's the way I'm playing for now,
a few games coming out recently where it's been like a PS5 advantage in performance for whatever reason, but this game shows it Series X pulling quite a ways ahead in some points.
Yeah,
we should qualify that
exactly.
95% of the time it's, you know, perfect 60. It's like that Call of Duty experience you'd expect in the ray tracing mode. You know, if you want to polish that off.
Okay, I'm glad they agree with me.
It's just
Xbox version look better,
but it works so well with ray tracing on. Yeah, I'd really recommend leaving it there.
I kind of agree. Like, if you're actually getting a frame rate that's this stable, close to 60 most of the time.
Next gen gonna be
both
beautiful,
machines,
man. Next gen gonna be
shadows,
great for both systems.
It's a really good sign for what's to come.
That's to say,
For
when it
both
does drop,
systems,
and
man,
there
they're gonna
are
be pushing.
moments like
I know
in
Sony's gonna push it to the limit.
set
I'm not sure about
where you're
Microsoft.
kind of,
Microsoft don't
chasing
really
this
care.
plane
Well,
with the
Sony care about
radio
graphics, so
controlled
Sony
car,
gonna push it to the
and
limit.
there's this massive drop on PS5 and it's not
Insomniac,
there
oh my
on
god, they're
Series
gonna
X if
be
we
some,
switch
do
to
some
that.
crazy stuff.
And there's another scene when Russia
Santa
is this
Monica,
complex, and
crazy
you're running
stuff.
through it while being fired at, and PS5 drops to like 40 FPS, and it's not an issue at all on Series X. So there are set piece moments where it really obviously chugs on PS5. Not a big issue as soon as you turn and find, you know, people to shoot. It's regular gameplay. PS5 is absolutely fine, but there is select moments where, yeah, that difference, it really shows Series X in a better light.
So basically then, with ray tracing on, they're both very stable, but it's a little more stable on Series X. And if you play it without ray tracing, they're both pretty much like 99.9% stable. What about Series S then?
Series S, obviously no ray tracing. I found the drops are in
No
very
ray
different
tracing?
spots. It's very good.
Ooh.
60 FPS, like, again, majority of the time. There's some small drops into the 50s during that kind of helicopter shootout where you're kind of panning across that village in Vietnam. And there's some other moments where, yeah, there's some tearing. There's adaptive VSync on every console, which means tearing is introduced along with the drops. But overall, it does really well. It holds up very well. But obviously, the load is very different. It's a very different tax on the system hardware.
I guess the good news, though, is if you're on Xbox, again, I want to mention it here once more, if you have a variable refresh rate display, I can confirm that it takes care of dips. Although, in that case, I was testing the 120 mode, but I know that VRR also works beautifully in 60 Hz.
So, 120 Hz is the next big one, and I think this is where both of us feel a lot more excited. Obviously, you've got to have
so
the right
they
TV
tested
for
60
it,
first
and,
on it. Now they're testing
HDMI 2.1 support on
Wow.
your TV to get the full range of
That's
the
a lot
resolutions
of power, man.
this game's pushing out above 1080p.
As you can see from the graph here, it actually runs extremely well overall, like really well overall. I didn't expect it to be as smooth as it is, and in fact, after like however many missions I went through, and I think you have footage here, is there's just that one part in the one mission with the helicopter where there's some dips, but otherwise I found that both consoles were really smooth. I actually played through all of this on both Xbox and PS5, and I found that on PS5 you can notice the tearing and slowdown in the beginning of the helicopter mission, and on Xbox I played it with VRR, and I didn't actually really notice any of those issues. But then I looked at your data, and it tells an interesting story.
Yeah, because without VRR, well, we should say it's between 100 and 120 FPS, which perceptibly isn't going to be a big difference. I think the metrics at the top there exaggerate in some sense, how extreme that feeling is. It's not 60 FPS, sub 60 FPS drops or anything. It's 120 down to 100. The strange thing is, we know ray tracing at 60 FPS works better on Series X, but as you can see here, PS5 takes the lead in the 120Hz mode. No clear reason why this is. Like, the resolution bounds on both modes are, perceptibly the same, and the feature set visually are the same. But yeah, PS5 seems to be, when it's pushed, really stressed in this set piece. It is
Man, this
PS5
game pushed the
that takes the
PS5.
lead. And I've seen this a couple of times in multiple tests, but it's again worth stressing that a lot of the campaign runs perfectly at 120, and likewise the multiplayer mode, which I played a lot of, just feels so wonderfully optimized for 120 on both consoles. So it's it's a complete non-issue, I think, especially if you've got VR enabled on Series X.
No, I mean, honestly, whatever drops occur on either machine, it's kind of negligible in the face of what you get, and how, it's actually more stable than your usual Call of Duty campaign even. I can't believe how well it hits 120 hertz on these machines. Again,
the game looks beautiful. No matter what console you get it on, it looks beautiful, man.
So
don't even worry about the console.
Performance is good in this game.
Enjoy the game.
And I think the team did an excellent job all around. The frame rate targets are met most of the time. It feels really nice and polished on all machines.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing we should also mention is that they take advantage of the DualSense controller, specifically on PS5, so you actually get tension in the triggers, which I think is really interesting. I think so. I
you get
suspect
feedback
that
from shooting
multiplayer folks are probably going to want to turn it off, because it does change the feel. I think it's really cool though for other modes, and I would probably leave it on because it's cool, but again, it does affect how fast you can press the trigger, because what they do is, each trigger on a weapon is modified in such a way, so like a pistol, as you pull the trigger, you'll feel tension right up until a certain point, and then it clicks in suddenly with force. You know what I mean? It's like it gives way, like the spring gives in or something.
There's kind of a pinch point.
Exactly, there's a pinch point. That's a good way to put it.
I noticed the difference when I moved back to Series X. I'm like, oh, it's missing. That's how much I kind of end up missing it sometimes. But for multiplayer...
So Call of Duty pretty much, Treyarch and those guys pretty much take advantage of the PlayStation controller, PlayStation 5 controller already.
So I think that's pretty much it.
And people like it, the advantage they take care of it,
image quality, we've kind of gushed a little bit about the visuals. It's really a great looking game. I was really impressed with that as well. And the campaign itself, it has its flaws, but I find it was made by Raven Software, by the way, which is really interesting. Big fan of their classic works. But it has some stuff you don't usually see.
What games Raven used to make before Call of Duty?
Dialogue trees, sneaking missions, and just kind of a different flow to it. So I kind of appreciate what they're trying to do there. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty solid package. It really looks great. It runs super well.
Loads of red barrels conveniently placed next to all the enemies, which I love.
Loads of red barrels, absolutely.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of it, and I think it's one of the most exciting games at launch for me. We went into this generation with, expecting 120 Hz and ray tracing, even if it's not reflections. It's exciting to see, the fulfillment of that promise. But right, that'll do for today then. Thank you so much, John, for joining me.
Of course, Tom, anytime.
And we'll do the usual wrap up here. If you did like this video, feel free to like or subscribe to our channel, and as always, ring the bell to get notifications.
Guys, man, that was the video. If you guys enjoyed that video, if you do enjoy that video, definitely leave a like, leave a comment, share the video, subscribe, and let me know which one is better, man. Which one you think performed better. Both games look very good. Pretty much both game is pretty much identical to me, man. So which whatever version you get is you're winning. You're winning no matter what, man. Because they put work into this Call of Duty, man. They put a lot of work into this Call of Duty, and they both look good. But me personally, I think the Xbox Series X kind of win. As it stated, this is one of the exception. Like most other games, the PS5 comes out the better PS5 version comes out the better version, man. So yeah, Xbox Series X version looks a little bit better, man. Not a lot. It's not like a big giant leap forward. It just look a little bit better, man. The texture, the lighting, all that stuff, man, looks a little bit better. It runs a little smoother. So yeah, let me know what you think about the video in general. Which one do you think looks better, PS5 version or Xbox Series X version? And shout out to Digital Foundry again for providing this video. Link will be in the description. I'm out of here though. Peace.